France will recognize Palestinian statehood, Macron says. This article is by Roger Cohen and read by an automated voice. President Emmanuel Macron announced late Thursday that France would recognize the state of Palestine as part of its historical commitment to a just and durable peace in the Middle East. In a surprise statement on X that followed months of hints and hesitations over possible French recognition of a Palestinian state, he said that he would make a formal announcement to that effect at the United Nations General Assembly in September in New York. Today, the most urgent thing is that the war in Gaza cease and the civilian population be helped, Mr. Macron said. His statement came as anger mounted across the world over the continued Israeli military operation in Gaza and growing starvation there. France would become the first of the group of 7 major industrialized nations, also including the United States, Britain, Canada, Germany, Japan, and Italy, to recognize a Palestinian state. The decision appeared likely to irk the Trump administration as it stands behind Israel and pursues its own attempts to end the war in Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, reacted angrily to the French move. He said in a statement that we strongly condemn Mr. Macron's decision to recognize a Palestinian state next to Tel Aviv in the wake of the October 7th massacre of 2023, adding that a Palestinian state would become a launch pad to annihilate Israel. Israel has consistently opposed French recognition of Palestinian statehood, saying it would reward Hamas terrorism and accusing Mr. Macron of leading, quote, a crusade against the Jewish state. Relations between the two countries have become strained and now appear certain to worsen. The announcement came on the same day that the United States and Israel walked away from Gaza ceasefire talks in Qatar, accusing Hamas of not acting in good faith. The U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said in a post on X that the United States strongly rejects Mr. Macron's plan. His post continued, "This reckless decision only serves Hamas propaganda and sets back peace. It is a slap in the face to the victims of October 7th. Hala Abu Hasira, the Palestinian ambassador to France, applauded Mr. Macron's decision, saying in a television interview that it demonstrated a France, quote, faithful to its history, faithful to its policies, and faithful to international law. She added that the message to Israel and the United States was clear. One cannot continue to impose facts on the ground, facts that render a two-state solution impossible. Other European states, including Spain, Ireland, and Norway, recognized a Palestinian state last year, but the French decision is of a different order. France is home to the largest Jewish and Muslim populations in Western Europe, and is the only nuclear power and only permanent member of the UN Security Council in the European Union. Mr. Macron, like a growing number of world leaders, has been exasperated by Mr. Netanyahu's refusal to end the war, despite the fact that Gaza has largely been reduced to rubble and tens of thousands of its inhabitants killed. Mr. Netanyahu's refusal to offer any plan for the future governance, security, and reconstruction of Gaza after the fighting stops has also incensed the French president and other international leaders. Confidence, clarity, and engagement, Mr. Macron wrote without elaborating. We will win the peace, but of course for the moment there is no peace. Still, his words indicate a conviction that a path to a two-state peace still exists, even as the possibility of achieving that appears ever more remote. More than 500,000 Israeli settlers now live in the occupied West Bank. Their numbers and settlements are growing, steadily chipping away at the territory widely seen as the core of a Palestinian state. The more extreme members of Mr. Netanyahu's right-wing government have suggested that all Palestinians should leave the ruins of Gaza. Mr. Netanyahu himself has dedicated his political career to ensuring no Palestinian state emerges, a view that has gained broader Israeli support since the October 7th Hamas attack. With President Trump apparently unwilling to pressure Mr. Netanyahu to end the war, and Mr. Macron's relations with the White House strained by differences over Ukraine, tariffs, and personal insults, the French leader apparently felt the moment had come to stand apart from the United States and offer a distinct European vision for the Middle East. It was not clear whether other members of the Group of Seven would follow the French example, although France indicated it hoped that would happen. Nor was it clear what territory France would recognize as comprising a Palestinian state. It's a powerful symbol, but without really doing anything on the ground to change Palestinians' plight, Aaron David Miller, the senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, said in an email message. It's largely virtue signaling. In a letter to Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian Authority president, posted at the same time as his statement, Mr. Macron said it was urgent to pursue, quote, the only viable solution that honors the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people, that ends terrorism and violence in all its forms, and that permits Israel and all the countries of the region to live in peace and security. He noted Mr. Abbas's call in a letter last month for Hamas to, quote, hand over its weapons, immediately free all hostages, and leave Gaza. The Palestinian leader also committed to holding elections and to reforming the Palestinian Authority, which administers parts of the West Bank and has earned a reputation for corruption and ineffectiveness. Such Palestinian promises have been made before, only to prove empty. I will be particularly attentive to the establishment of a ceasefire in Gaza, to the liberation of all hostages still held by Hamas, to its disarmament, and to the consolidation of the Palestinian Authority across all Palestinian territories, Mr. Macron wrote. He added a handwritten greeting, with my confidence and my engagement for the peace and security of all. Most nations of the world recognize Palestinian statehood, but the United States and most of its major allies do not. The French announcement came as it had appeared that France was backing away from the idea of recognizing a Palestinian state. A conference next week at the United Nations about a two-state peace, chaired by France and Saudi Arabia, has effectively been downgraded, with neither Mr. Macron nor Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, the de facto Saudi ruler, appearing as they had been scheduled to do last month. The conference was postponed in June because of fighting between Israel and Iran. A French diplomat, who declined to be named in keeping with official practice, said Saudi Arabia had been evasive about setting a new date. Mr. Trump has been fiercely opposed to the conference, placing the Saudi crown prince in a delicate position. With the conference apparently losing momentum and relevance, Mr. Macron decided to make a bold move to galvanize it. As he has shown repeatedly over 8 years in power, and in his rise to the presidency at the age of 38, he is a risk-taker by nature, although not always one who has adequately prepared the ground for his gambles to yield fruit. Aurélien Breeden contributed reporting from Paris.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we have one more reporting by the New York Times of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Let's get into it.
Justice Kagan urges Supreme Court to explain itself in emergency decisions. This article is by Abby Van Sickle and read by an automated voice. Justice Elena Kagan said Thursday that the Supreme Court was shortchanging the public and lower court judges by failing to explain its reasoning in rulings on cases that come before the court on an emergency basis, including challenges to the Trump administration's efforts to transform the federal government. I think as we have done more and more on this emergency docket, there becomes a real responsibility that I think we didn't recognize when we first started down this road to explain things better, Justice Kagan said. I think that we should hold ourselves, sort of on both sides, to a standard of explaining why we're doing what we're doing. Even 2 or 3 pages of explanation, she said, would be helpful. To just sort of say, here's the basic issue, the basic problem that we see. Go fix it. Her comments came during an appearance in Monterey at an annual meeting of federal judges and lawyers from the Ninth Circuit. Speaking in conversation with a federal judge and a lawyer, Justice Kagan focused on the emergency docket and her concerns that the justices' failure to provide the court's reasoning in cases could make it difficult for lower court judges to understand how to apply the decisions and for the public to understand the court's reasoning. In recent months, the Supreme Court has been bombarded with emergency applications, many of them focused on Trump administration policies, including efforts to downsize the federal government and to remove temporary immigration protections for hundreds of thousands of people, as well as President Trump's decisions to remove heads of government agencies. Many of these applications have challenged temporary orders issued by lower court judges, and challenges to those orders have zoomed up to the justices on the emergency docket. I think we should be cautious about acting on the emergency docket, Justice Kagan said. Sometimes we have to, but I think we should be cautious. Decisions on that docket, known by critics as the shadow docket, are typically not fully briefed and argued before the court. Often, emergency docket decisions do not provide any description of the court's reasoning, leaving lower court judges to decipher the meaning. According to a tally by Stephen I. Gladden, a law professor at Georgetown and the author of a book about the court's emergency work called the Shadow Docket, the court has granted emergency relief to the Trump administration 7 times, without any explanation at all in recent months. Justice Kagan explained that, unlike with standard cases, the justices do not typically meet in person and discuss how to rule on emergency applications. She said that they fashioned their approach as they began to see an increasing number of emergency applications. But she said it was time for the court to begin providing more of an explanation because the orders themselves don't tell anybody anything about why we've done what we've done. Justice Kagan pointed to a decision by the court last week that cleared the way for the Trump administration to make significant cuts to the education department. She and the other 2 liberal justices, Sonia Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson, dissented in that case, explaining their reasoning in a sharply worded 19-page dissent. But the court's order in that case, as in many emergency decisions, was unsigned and gave no reasoning. She said the lower court that had issued the decision to block the president's plans to downsize the department now had to guess how and why the Supreme Court made its decision and figure out how to apply it. What's that court supposed to think? She said. Justice Kagan's focus on the trial and appeals court judges was a theme throughout her interview, in which she also addressed rising threats against judges. She did not mention President Trump or his allies, who have verbally attacked federal trial judges, who have made decisions blocking some of the president's policies. She also explained that some of her conservative colleagues at the court faced targeted attacks after the court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Some of my colleagues on the majority side, were confronted with protests outside their houses, including houses with children in them, and a gunman appeared at one of my colleagues' houses. And that is scary stuff, Justice Kagan said. I think now there are a number of judges sort of all up and down the judicial hierarchy that are being confronted with the same. She condemned the threats on judges, saying that vilifying judges in that way is a step beyond. She urged lower court judges to continue their day-to-day work, unbowed by any efforts to undermine the rule of law. The response to perceived lawlessness of any kind is law, Justice Kagan said. The way an independent judiciary should counter assaults on an independent judiciary is to act in the sorts of ways that judges are required to act.